Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Optimal Championship League as we are about to dive into this game number 2. Divine Temple, Optimal Esports Nova, taking to the Rift once more. What are you hoping to see out of this draft phase, Aulz?
I want to see anything out of Divine Temple. I want to see a spark of life here from them because after that game, it just feels like they've been demolished mentally. I mean, 29-3 Nyarko, over a 20,000 gold lead. They need to show they still have some fight left in them.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that it's a matter of Divine Temple just stabilizing. I think that they probably are going to be outplayed once again in these individual lanes. The very first few seconds of this game were giving me confidence in the likes of Cuddies, who was really out trading Cinderace, but it was a matter of obviously TF's power budget being placed elsewhere.
Yeah, the TF was just incredibly powerful in terms of affecting the side lanes. We saw how much a single teleport towards the bot side did in terms of making Major into a threat. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they have to respond to that kind of pressure in the future as they ban away the TF. An aggressive use of the ban, and it leaves so much open for Nova here in this game.
Yeah, that's what concerns me. The fact of the matter is that now they aren't going to be going for anything that tanky, that aggressive in the jungle role. Rather, Bone Zone is just looking to tear apart team fights. I don't think that Viego's skirmishing power early can really match up against the fact that Sejuani is so tanky, but does that really matter when now you have to both take down the Viego and the Zeri to have any chance of the 5v5? Divine Temple are going to both stabilize with T1 owner going towards that Sejuani for themselves, so they won't be bullied quite as hard as they were on the Wukong, but they're also making sure that Static will always have guaranteed value regardless of how hard Major smashes this lane by getting themselves an Ashe.
I don't love the Ashe. Just in general, I think that she's been really underwhelming recently. We saw it last night where the Ashe just didn't have any meaningful effect here. And while I'm aware that Cuddies has been the kind of central power point for this team, especially on the Malzahar here, which they are picking up early just so they don't have to worry about it, I don't love this for them. I wish that we would see something else from Static here in the bot lane.
Yeah. And the fact is, Wukong is now also pickable for Nova. They're going to lock that in. And this is a new look for PO1, who actually could play Viego top now that I think about it. But regardless, I think that Optimal Esports Nova now know that their burden is to just make sure that once they get a lead, they're able to cement team fights that Divine Temple can simply not answer back against. And Wukong is a great disruptor that also is going to work as kind of a counter to this Malzahar, because you're mostly looking to press R on this area. I don't think anybody will deny that this is the champion you need to deal with the most. But Wukong can just run up, Cyclone in the middle of everybody, prevent Malzahar from ever getting a valuable ult off. And I think that from there, OE Nova have gotten a lot of the things that Divine Temple are bringing to the table on lock yet again. Now, Divine Temple's burden of execution is incredibly low given the fact that they're on Ashe, Malzahar, and Sejuani, but I still am worried about their lack of damage currently.
Yeah, the burden of execution is very low, but it also means that there's not a lot of opportunity for outplay. Once you use the Bolo, once you use the Enchantress Lara, once you use the Malzahar ultimate, you don't have a whole lot left because these champions are so reliant on that particular portion of their kit. Sejuani, of course, being the exception. As a tank, you can still be relevant. But it just feels like DT is going to be stuck on fire and forget mode. If they miss, they're not going to be valuable.
I like the Leona quite a bit. I think that if you are going to go for engagers, Leona is incredibly good with Zeri because of the ability for you to not only bring the enemy towards yourself, or rather yourself towards the enemy, but also you're able to use her Zenith Blade in such a way to cover Zeri's back. Let's just say that we saw a support come out for Divine Temple to go alongside the Ashe that may resemble the Nautilus that is banned out. What could happen is that once they hit that hook, Leona just rides on in with her Zenith Blade against the person who's standing still to hook up the Zeri. And that means, boom, it's once again a fight where Zeri and Leona are together. It's almost a 2v1 in a lot of cases, particularly with a champion like Ashe who wants to play at a distance. And I think, yet again, this is just an example of Optimal Esports Nova answering back beautifully and setting up well versus Divine Temple. The Malphite top makes a lot of sense for Divine Temple, but now it's a matter of the shifting of burdens of this champion, moving from scaling up and providing items to the likes of the Victor Late to now Malphite needing to actually be the point man for a 5v5 team fight for Divine Temple. And I already talked about how I think that their comp, while it's easy to execute, doesn't necessarily flourish in those kinds of situations.
Nyarko, are we looking at a Wukong mid?
Ooh, I think that we could possibly be looking at a Wukong mid. There's a chance at Maokai mid actually against the Malzahar. I think that it's actually surprisingly good in a situation like this where there's not a whole lot that the Malzahar could do to exert kill pressure. Wukong is a little bit squishier, and therefore I think I'd rather have the tank versus the mage. But yeah, there's definitely flex potential between these.
And of course, as being mentioned before, there is a chance that the Viego goes into the mid lane as well. We've seen lane Viego before, although not so much in recent patches. So anything could be going up against this Malzahar, and given the, let's say, propensity for interesting drafts that OE Nova has shown, we can't quite predict what's going to happen until we see it in client draft here in just a few seconds. But
all right,
I have to ask, Nyarko, how do you feel about this Divine Temple draft overall? You mentioned earlier that you were concerned about the damage profile that they had. With the addition of Malphite Seraphine, do you feel any better?
Nope, not at all. I feel worse, frankly. Malphite could go full AP, but then you have 3 mages on your team. Therefore, I think that they're probably just going to be a very tanky frontliner alongside the Sejuani. Malzahar is going to be able to ult a few people, but now, even with significant protection from these 2 champions, I don't actually think that his R does enough to melt Zeri hard enough for Ashe to be able to follow up or Seraphine to do damage. It just feels that outside of beautiful situations where everybody has R up and you're sniping people with Ashe Arrow, you're hitting people with Malzahar ult, you have the Malphite knocking up 5 and Seraphine following in with the Encore. OE Nova is just going to be able to shrug off everything.
The one downside that I see to Nova's comp is that they are almost entirely AD. You're going to get the AP damage from the Maokai, of course, but outside of that, Viego, Wukong, Zeri, all heavily spec'd into AD. If the Malphite has the chance to build to 2, maybe even 3 items, it's going to be effectively untouchable here. Ditto with the Sejuani. So unless OE Nova can keep control from the get-go, which obviously they did in game 1, but if they lose control for long enough for the tanks of DT to get control, it may well be over for them.
Yeah, I think that with the Wukong and Maokai actually now being locked in top and jungle respectively, Optimal Esports Nova are going to go for Viego mid. That's a bit concerning for me because I just don't really see how Viego with the range disadvantage doing a whole lot versus Cuddies, but I guess there is some roam potential there. It's certainly a playable thing, as we've seen Lane Viego a few times, not only in this league, but also at multiple levels of play. But I am a bit concerned overall with this indexing. I think that Divine Temple can honestly be said to have a slightly better draft with this arrangement of champions, but Optimal Esports Nova just seem to know how to play basically anything in any role.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we did say that last game we thought the Divine Temple had a slightly better draft as well. So clearly the draft in and of itself is not the decider here. But you're right, I don't necessarily love these lane assignments, even if Viego fills much of the same niche that the Twisted Fate did in the last draft. I just worry that we're not going to see quite as much value from it because the Viego won't be able to survive the early game.
Yep, and now with the Zeri matching up against the Ashe, I think that while this is a lane that can easily punish an over-aggressive Zeri, it's also one that just provides very little in the way of actual kill pressure, barring any mistakes from Red Squad. And Optimal Esports Nova have not been known for anything except for the most conscious of mistakes, where maybe they're playing a little bit fast and loose after forging a 10,000 gold lead, and that makes me very worried about Static and Shadow Omen as well.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot that can be done to predict here in Nyarko because this OE Nova team has proven themselves so unpredictable. That being said, let's go ahead and predict anyway. How are you feeling about this game? You think DT can force a game 3 here, or do you think Nova will take it in style once again?
I think that it's going to be closer. DT might even be able to get a small lead early, but I do think that Optimal Esports Nova has already proven themselves to be the better team. And barring any disastrous mistakes, I don't really see a way that DT will be able to get a victory here. And unfortunately, therefore, I think it's a 2-0 for a second night running.
Well, we will have to see. Everything comes out on the Rift in just a couple of minutes here, Nyarko. But until then, unless you have anything else that you would like to share with the crowd, I think it may be time for us to go ahead and step aside here, let these teams load in and show their stuff in Week 4.
Sounds like a plan. I guess we'll see everybody soon, and you guys don't want to miss out on the stuff that's coming out in this game. Mid Diego, who would have thought it? Hello, friends, and welcome back to the OCL for Divine Temple versus Esports or Optimal Esports Nova game number 2 underway. As we have had quite a bit of a few swaps in this one. The Viego mid, the just general shift in Bone Zone and PO1's roles in this game, combined with the fact that Divine Temple has completely moved out of the realm of sanity into the realm of playing as defensively as possible and hoping to lock down some of the crazy carries that Optimal Esports Nova have to find themselves with in that game number 1. Let's see if they can do it.
Yeah, I mean, given how game number 1 went, the chances seem slim. But Nyarko, this is the OCL. Anything is possible. So we'll have to just hold our breath and keep watch here as the game begins. No fireworks in the early game just yet, but game 1 was much the same. Very slow, very patient and intelligent until suddenly it wasn't.
Yeah, and Divine Temple just need to prolong that period of the game a bit more than we saw in that first round Aulz. Like I said before, they have very safe laners and just generally a pretty clear game plan. I am worried about their ceiling in terms of being able to pump damage onto core members of Optimal Esports Nova, but at the very least, they're going to be securing some kills in this one. I can feel that in my bones.
Yeah, one can only hope that it'll be a little bit closer than game 1. Give us some content worth watching here. But you know what they say, all publicity is good publicity, and for Divine Temple, they're certainly getting some kind of publicity right now.
Yeah, Divine Temple is a team that we've casted before, and I remember them just performing better than what they did in this first game when we casted them last week. So I want to see a little bit more of that DT rather than the DT that we've been getting tonight so far.
Yeah, and of course, it's entirely possible that we were just looking at 2 tiers of team in the OCL, that this is simply an OE Nova team that is categorically better than Divine Temple, but anything is possible, and I'd like to see a little bit of that spark from last week's unfortunately technically struggling cast.
All right, Divine Temple and Optimal Esports Nova have set up with what I think are pretty even lanes right now, with PO1 the only one with priority, as kind of expected, versus the Malphite. But to note, Divine Temple is looking to be the first aggressor on the map, trying to find something versus Major and Crispy. There's a flash forward after the team play misses, and that means that Major had no defense. It's going to be an easy kill pickup. In fact, make it 2 now, as that was a great stun for Owner off the back of Shadow Omen slow. 2 in the span of just a few short seconds means Divine Temple is very clearly on top in this one.
You saw that too, right, Nyarko?
Yeah, I actually don't. Was that mini aggro? I don't think they used Ignite.
Certainly was. There was no reason for the Sejuani to die there, but did just kind of fall off out of nowhere, not respecting the damage from minions at level 3. So in the grand scheme of things, a 2 for 1. But Nyarko, that's a good look for Divine Temple. They're getting some pressure early. My one gripe is I wish the damage would have gone, or the kills would have gone onto the carry, but it's an Ashe. She'll make do.
Yeah, Shadow Omen is not going to hate the fact that they're just deeper accelerated into the build path, given the fact that even supports Seraphine scales really nicely. And Owner just getting extra tankiness means that now they're able to fully stabilize versus Bone Zone. And at the end of the day, they're bringing that value to any lane that they decide to gank. That's always what I harp on when it comes to a jungler accessing kills. I'm not too torn up about it at the end of the day.
Yeah, speaking of junglers looking to access, we do see Bone Zone trying to find something here into the mid lane of Cuddies, who is running out of mana but still has that shield available and will be able to walk out just fine despite Flash being burnt from Bone Zone to get in range of that Twisted Advance. They did get the Flash out of Cuddies there, so I don't think that's an entirely wasted trip.
Yeah, but Bone Zone now probably has to wait until level 6 to really have any great kill pressure, barring the chance that Divine Temple just over pushes and is really deep in enemy territory without their summoner spells available. Maokai is a champion that really only gets one shot, in my opinion, prior to level 6, because they have to use Flash in order to really make the most out of Bramble Smash and Twisted Advance. But I've seen very aggressive Maokai at the same time succeed, so perhaps I will be proven wrong yet again.
As we've said more than once this cast, this is OCL. Absolutely anything is possible. But we're seeing a completely different Divine Temple here in Game 2. They are showing aggression, they're showing presence on the map. It's making this game feel a whole lot closer than Game 1 did.
You have to watch out for Major and Crisp. He's trying to set up for a kill. A Zenith Blade on top of Shadow Omen probably leads to the Seraphine dying. And they're really well prepared to go for those kinds of engages. However, it really doesn't feel like Shadow Omen has much in the way of fear about this because Owner is actually coming in. And now in another 2v3 with Crispy having her flash available, but Major not being so lucky, it looks like this Leona is just going to get run down.
Yeah, that's unfortunate timing there, not respecting the fact that Owner would likely be in the area to contest the Drake here. Another misplay from a bot lane that seemed so clean in game one. Major and Crispy really not firing this game.
Yep, and Bone Zone is once again looking for a flank, but up against Cuddies, it's just so hard to get anything done. The Malzahar is perfectly happy being pushed in versus Cinderace, and beyond that, the Spell Shield just makes it even harder for them to layer the CC in such a way that Divine Temple actually are going to lose their mid laner, even after that flash goes down. So things are very much looking up for DT right now. PO1 also on a little bit of a roam themselves, but I don't think they can find anything either.
And this was kind of your concern, wasn't it? That Wild Cinderace on the Viego just wouldn't have a whole lot of effectiveness into the Malzahar. We just haven't seen any real value. Although, Wild Cinderace continuing to outfarm like mad, up about 10 CS at the moment here, over the ranged mage in the mid lane.
Yeah, and this is probably going to be the dynamic that OEN looks to capitalize on. Major is also CSing quite nicely, and obviously PO1 is going to slowly pull out to a lead versus Wushiwu by virtue of how that matchup plays. And maybe because they are going to, now after having lost a few members during this laning phase, probably play a bit safer. What we're looking for now is going to be a clash around a Rift Herald or around a Dragon to see whether or not OEN are able to forge back a lead, or if Divine Temple are actually going to take this one.
Yeah, and speaking of that Drake, it does look like Nova going to go ahead and get started on that now. The Maokai tanking that up and starting to take that down as Leona roaming around a little bit here, trying to continue to pressure on Cuddies, but despite all the pressure, they really have not made anything stick onto the Malzahar.
Cuddy's wiggling a little bit because Owner was in the area and now consigns them to get hit by the Zenith Blade. Cinderace is able to flash back, and now the Malzahar will finally die. It takes 3, but Owner is pretty sad about this because now they have to stay here in the mid lane to absorb any wave that Cinderace is trying to walk in.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of wave there, so Owner won't lose a bunch of time, especially with Bone Zone showing up at the same time. And in fact, recalling on a ward, so they'll have really good understanding of where this Maokai is at all times. Good enough, in fact, they're going to go for this Rift Herald very early here. Owner wants to have a little bit more relevance on the map, and I like this. This is a different side of this jungler. Feels like they're really being a part of this game as opposed to just being pulled along through it.
Oh dear, great stun off of the slow Shadow Omen with the beat drop there. Means Crispy and Major will just have to back off. Static has their stacks. Major, therefore, will have to try to protect their support by using their Lightning Crash, and that slows them down too much. Static gets on top of them. Crispy's also going to fall, and now this Ashe has become the main carry and the focal point of this game.
Yeah, this is a different side of Divine Temple. We normally see Cuddies being the strong point, but right now Static is taking on the reins. And well, I commented that I don't love the Ashe. Right now, with this much lead, they'll be more than capable of taking over this game. As they look to take the first Drake, this Cloud will be theirs in just a few seconds.
And I'm a little bit concerned about Major and Crispy just not really seeming to know how to play this matchup. They have to ensure that they have burst damage available, and they need to be able to layer that burst in such a way that Static doesn't get to free fire for the entirety of the time that they're engaging. I think that Shadow Omen has to be the first one to go, but obviously, if you're playing at the kinds of arm's reach where Shadow Omen can still aim stuff like that beat drop, you're getting whittled down the entire time that you're dancing around looking for a fight, and therefore, OEN, we saw in that situation, took one bad stun and Static was able to run them down.
Yeah, I think this is a little bit of bleed over of the mentality from last game as Wushiwu may be caught out here. The Nature's Grasp coming through to try and lock down this Malphite. But yeah, last game, Major got so fed that it feels like they haven't gotten out of that mindset yet. They still feel like they're fed.
Cinderace is actually going for the re-engage versus Cuddies. That's going to be the Malzahar ultimate blow to press the Viego, who is just Heartbreaker back. Bone Zone is now trying to cover as Owner gives chase, but now the Sejuani has to flash away. They've bitten off a bit more than they could chew. Cuddies isn't really there to help, and that is going to be not only Wishy-Woo dying, but Owner as well. Great solo bolo in the top side for PO1 that was off camera.
Yeah, tale of two sides of the map, isn't it, Nyarko? PO1 continuing to do well. Dominant in this top lane, up 30 CS and looking to crash this wave as well. While Cinderace finally starting to put their foot down a little bit, continuing to maintain this 10 CS lead in the mid lane. It's just this bot lane for OE Nova that has failed to live up to expectations.
The good news is that Major has a Cole and is doing a good job staying at parity with Static in regards to CS. So eventually they will get a little bump in their gold income versus Static. The problem is there is already a 700 gold gap between these two, and that is not going to be fully made up for by that single item. So Bone Zone, Cinderace, and PO1 are now going to be the major carries of OEN, and they need to be able to drag out the timeline of this game in such a way that maybe eventually Major will get back on track.
Yeah, they're looking to find fights here. They still want to try and turn this bot lane around as we see the Maokai coming around. But on Vision, there's no way that the Treant can get in here. And in fact, Bone Zone may be in trouble without the flash, without any way out over the wall, is getting
great rotation
down. And
yeah,
will
that's
be
the
deleted.
Leona hit by the Encore. Major goes over the wall. However, the Leona is not so lucky as they're going to be stunned by the Enchanted Crystal Arrow. Major once again is going to activate their ultimate, but it just doesn't do enough damage to repel the advance of Divine Temple. And that's another 2 for nothing centered around the bot lane that gets Static up to 3-0-4.
Yeah, if you're Bone Zone at this point, you leave the bot lane alone. Tell Major and Crispy, you just play safe. You are no longer champions. You are cannon minions. Play like it. And focus on PO1 and Cinderace, who are going to have to be your carries throughout the rest of this game. Major is not going to be a major player.
Let's be real, though. That was Bone Zone's fault. So if they said that to me right after running bot side, trying to clear Vision, then getting claps on by Owner and company, I'd probably say, look, we are playing safe. You're the one who's coming in pretending like we have prio when we don't. So OEN.
Oh, I don't disagree. Absolutely.
In the bot lane. But yeah, I think it's more Major and Crispy telling Bone Zone to chill rather than vice versa right now.
Very fair. Either way, the bot lane needs to not, as Major might just die here. The damage coming through. Wall Ride may be enough to save them. Yes, Major gets out with a hair's breadth of health.
Here's the other question. Do you think that Zeri, given where they are in the game right now, will ever have to pay the QSS tax, or are they just simply not the focus anymore? Do you think Cuddies is ever going to be using their suppression, their Never Grasp on them?
I think if you're the Zeri, you deliberately choose not to buy a QSS because you want Cuddies to target you. You want the Malzahar to waste the ultimate on you, even though you're not really relevant in this game. Because if it goes on you, it's not going on Cinderace.
Well, the gold lead is only about 1,000 in favor of Divine Temple, which is certainly infinitely better for them than what happened in game number 1, as Optimal Esports had 10 times their lead in their favor in that at this point in that game. But this still isn't enough, I think, to buy them clear advantage even late game, as the scaling from Cinderace, Major, and company is going to be quite good. And Cuddies now will be able to wiggle away from the Nature's Grasp, but they are unable to get out from under Cinderace. So another kill back in. Optimal Esports Nova even up the gold with that single kill.
Yeah, this mid lane has continued to be a power point despite the weird draft. While Cinderace, now that they have their legs under them, feeling a whole lot more confident, feeling a whole lot more consistent, and doing a whole lot more to keep this team in the game. As we mentioned before, if they can go ahead, sacrifice the bot lane, and really focus on building around the Viego, I think they are still in good shape. I think Divine Temple has to be wary of what the top side of the map can bring to the table for Nova.
Divine Temple is able to get priority over the second dragon of the game, though. Bone Zone is currently clearing out Vision, but I could easily see with Shadow Omen on the Seraphine, them just bombing waves and then walking up. So at the very least, we could have contestation of this neutral objective, but I think Divine Temple want to stack up on this front. This is one of their core weaknesses right now. That being said, Major has gotten themselves a static shift, and they are not that far behind the build path of Ashe. This could be the time for Red Squad to strike, and actually, they're the ones starting up this Infernal Drain.
Yeah, and they have numbers advantage. The Malzahar and the Malphite are a little bit slow to this fight. Owner will steal the Drake, but I'm not sure that they win the fight overall.
Look at the knock-up. The approach on the backlight is massive. Woo is got an unstoppable force in and get a multi-man knock-up. The problem is Major stays alive. It is tearing through the team off their lightning crash. Owner's got nowhere to go. Cuddies is trying to escape. They flash back, but they're the sole surviving member for Divine Temple. And Optimal Esports Nova are able to turn around the game in an instant. They get themselves the gold lead. They get themselves the momentum.
Yeah, and that is a 5-for-1 Nyarko, almost entirely on the back of Cinderace and PO1. This is what the team needed, and this is what Divine Temple had to fear. Yes, the bot lane is strong right now, but the bot lane is not strong enough to be able to take on the entirety of Nova. So a fight like that, where they were separated from their tanks, where they were separated from the destruction of Cuddies, proved fatal. We need to see slightly more intelligent play from DT, making use of their win conditions instead of over-committing to them.
I mean, but this is the problem with DT's composition. That was a gold advantage, and they didn't have the damage to win versus Optimal Esports Nova. What the hell are they going to do now that once again they're behind on gold? They have to take 5v5s because that's what the composition desires.
Well, that was a not really fight with gold advantage, because sure, they were ahead, but they were ahead entirely on the back of Static. And Static was immediately taken out of that fight by PO1 with the Cyclone, with the damage on the backside. Shadow Omen didn't even get to do anything outside of drop their ultimate in that fight. Static was chased all the way back to the tier 1. You have to have the Ashe actually dealing damage for the gold gap to mean anything.
Cinderace is so incredibly strong right now. They just face tank the entirety of Nether Grasp, and the sheer presence of Bone Zone and PO1 meant that Divine Temple couldn't actually collapse to make the most of that Malzahar R, and therefore Cinderace is only taken to about half health. They're able to continue to stabilize this part of the map, and Bone Zone is moving onto the Rift Herald with PO1 on the flank. They go in with the Cyclone's first charge. They get the knockup. Crispy's also going to ride their Zenith Blade in. Cinderace is coming. You can hear the war drums. You can see OEN want to end this series in 2 games, and they do that by slaying Cuddies and keeping Wishy Woo locked up. Cinderace, yet again, a massive point to this team as Major is able to deftly dodge out of the way of the Enchanted Crystal Arrow, and now they're taking the 1v1 versus Static, and they win off the lightning crash. DT have lost every modicum of lead that they had.
Yeah, Cinderace scoring goal after goal here, just like their namesake. This is disastrous for Divine Temple. You cannot lose the game like this off of your own mistakes, Nyarko. This is not how the script needed to go.
Divine Temple have a way back in. This is certainly not as lost as game number 1, but I would agree, Aulz. This is also a kind of an unmitigated disaster. As I said before, OEN don't like to give up leads that they have forged for themselves, and this is frankly a lead that I would say is game-defining for any other team. The fact that it's in the hands of OEN once again means that this is almost a guaranteed dub. DT need to take probably 1 or 2 great team fights and access Major first with their CC now to have a shot, but simultaneously you also have to watch out for the destruction from PO1, and Cinderace is also an immense source of damage for the team.
Yeah, Cinderace at 5-0-3, having fully completed the Blade of the Ruin King and being very, very dangerously close to that Divine Thunder. Will have it on back, actually sitting on 1,800 gold in pocket. That 2-item Viego Spike is going to be nauseatingly powerful for this OE Nova squad. They'll be looking to take fights around this Herald wherever they choose to drop it, more than likely, and potentially, depending on when they decide to use it in the next about 20 seconds that it has on the timer, could still be up for long enough to cause disruption around this Baron and give OE Nova a chance of taking that on spawn as well.
And PO1 and company are all really just good at coordinating in such a way that they seem to always have first mover advantage around neutral objectives. You see Major just sitting there with Static at their back, and Crispy is hovering so deep in enemy territory to ensure that the Ashe and Seraphine have to wait in order to receive the wave rather than being able to push up and actively contest for maybe an angle at Dragon. And that means that I feel this is also going to be one of those situations where there's just no way for Divine Temple to go for drag. They won't be able to stack up for soul, and now that's one of the major win conditions gone. That being said, look at the pings top. Sejuani and Ash are moving onto the Baron Nashor, as OEN may have over-indexed a little bit to try to crash this Rift Herald bot.
This is a very bold play, Nyarko. With an Ash to burn this down, this is absolutely something that they can do. But at the same time, if they get caught on the way out of this Baron pit, if they're not fast enough in taking this, if they don't walk out of this with 2-3 Baron buffs on their back, this could be disastrous and end the game for them as Major's going in.
Yeah, that being said, PO1 is hit by the Enchanted Crystal Arrow and Encore. It's going to take a while before they can make it into the meat of the team, but they will do so with the Cyclone eventually. And now, with the entirety of OEM thundering upon DT, they will not be able to back with any Baron buffs at all, Aulz. That may just be game ending.
5-4-0, Nyarko. They got the Baron, but it cost them literally everything they had. This is the issue with that call. If it had worked, it would have been brilliant, but because it didn't, it is an unmitigated disaster. They lose all the buffs, they lose the Drake, they lose even more pressure all across the map as Cinder Ace continuing to push in. The walls are coming down. You can hear the horns. Jericho is not long for the earth.
I will say, this would be the call that I will also make for Divine Temple. In the abstract, it made a lot of sense. And frankly, it was up to the intuition of Major and the rest of the team to realize, hey, we haven't seen DT for a while. I wonder what they're up to, that caused them to move over towards that Baron. And they are frankly lucky that they had all their tools available to Lightning Crash, then flash back over that Baron corner in order to get to safety before they were just ran down. Because if the Zeri wasn't in that fight, Divine Temple probably got the resets and probably kept this game alive. So if there was a time to gamble, it was there and then, and I applaud them for that. But yeah, this game is now over.
That being said, this is a better Divine Temple squad than we saw in Game 1. If there was a team out of the two versions that we've seen to come back, this team, the early games that we saw from them, if they can bring that energy back, they may still have a chance despite the 8,000 gold lead, despite the pressure that OE Nova is now creating across the map. There's still a small chance. There's still whispers of hope. Those shutdowns are so massive. The objective bounties on those turrets so juicy that there's still hope if you're a DT fan.
Yeah, that being said, I don't really see a way that because of the map state, they would be able to push back up and initiate fights on their own terms. It's another turret count of 5-0 with nothing in favor of DT right now. And while Red Squad doesn't have the Baron buff at their back, they have the virtual gold lead to just kind of run through the entirety of the enemy team. And you really have to watch out in situations like this where, yes, there is a tower up, but Bone Zone has Nature's Grasp, and you can just get completely obliterated in an instant if you overextend. Wishiwu is really fishing for something here, but they got to be super careful with so much of their backup so far behind. And look at PO1 on the flank of a lifetime. They're angling in on 3 Blue Squad members. One of their charges will be denied by the Nether Grasp, but PO1 will eventually kill the Ash, and now Major has used their Lightning Crash once again to help secure yet another ace for OEN.
5-0 once more. The team fighting capacity of this Nova squad just feels unparalleled. It feels like they are operating as one heart, one mind right now. It's incredible seeing this because you really have to feel like Wishiwu and Owner should be able to do more to buy space for the Ash, but there's just nothing. There's no space, there's no opportunity. Static is dead before they even know that they're being attacked.
All right. It looks like with the tower going down alongside the inhibitor, Divine Temple have lost any presence on the map, but the game isn't quite over just yet. They have to ensure that in this defense, they are not giving up more kills, but with the 2 Nexus Turrets, they should be fine. I don't know why they're walking up to this dying tier 3, as now that allows for Bozo to just splash into Twisted Advance on top of the Ash, and Major once again goes unstoppable, getting a double kill as the Malphite also engages desperately try to save their ADC. There goes under the tower, and with the wave, this is just going to be the end of the series.
Yeah, one would have to think Cuddy's is still alive. Cuddy's has been such a major presence for DT that maybe it'll be just enough to scare away OEN, despite the fact that Malzahar's only 1-6. And in fact, that is what we do see. OEN choosing to play this safe, choosing to back out, choosing to give DT a second lease on life. But boy, oh boy, is it close to the end for the Divine Temple squad.
I'm a little bit confused that OEN don't seem to have that killer instinct right at this final point of the game, given the fact that they have the killer instinct to go in on static to begin with. It could just be the case that they don't want to risk giving over some immense shutdowns. But like I said before, even if you lose a few people during those kinds of fights, because it's a 3v2 or a 4v2, you probably are still ending the game. You just need to kill some relatively squishy members of DT. And given the gold gap, I don't see a way that you lose a fight like that, even with both of the Nexus turrets.
You have 3 members on the map with 1,000 gold shutdowns, including the member who was weakest in the early game, Major, now sitting at 7-2-10, hasn't died in about 20 minutes. It just feels like you have all the power in your corner, but at the same time, I would prefer for teams to play it smart and play it slow than to try and force and give up a chance at winning the game. So I don't hate this from OE Nova.
Yeah, and because Barret is spawning up in 10 seconds, this is probably just going to be the death knell. They just wanted a bit more priority in all of their lanes, and the best way to do that is by getting the big purple worm that was so cruelly denied to them by Divine Temple's rush to take earlier on. That being said, once again, OEN are able to split the map, and now they're going for the dragon, but this is definitely not enough to keep them stable. I don't think we're seeing Soul on either side.
No, I don't love the choice to trade a single Chemtech Drake for the Baron here, and they might not even get it as PO1 is causing chaos. Owner taking a long time to kill this, going down under 1,000 health, and will be forced to run away. So the Drake even is denied from this squad. The trade goes south. And with how much pressure this OE Nova squad is putting on the map, they'll take the Drake and likely the Nexus as well, it feels like. I just don't like the decision-making from Divine Temple with their lead, with what they've done with it. It feels like they've wasted their opportunities.
Yeah, I would say that any team that goes from having about 1,000 to 2,000 gold advantage versus OEN to, now being down about 13,000 probably didn't do well with their lead all.
Well, sure.
That being said, I do think that they fought at the right times during this game. They just did not set up their fights well, and it comes down to just a relatively shaky draft with what I said before was a very low ceiling. They're unable to do damage, and now that has turned into a situation where every person on OEN is a walking raid boss. PO1 at less than half health is still going to try to take a fight versus Cuddies, and they're happy to do so. That's the Flash, that's the Nether Grasp, all gone from this champion, and PO1 for some reason decides to turn around at the last second to give Cuddies one more look on the state of the game. Divine Temple now have lost their mid laner, they have lost Wishy Blue, their top laner, and they're about to lose their Nexus turrets.
Yeah, which means this is the perfect time to shout out Spooks in the Twitch chat for gifting 5 tier 1 subs and using their Prime sub as well. We appreciate it. That's a lot of generosity to help support the OCL community as we are watching OE Nova systematically dismantle this game. One Nexus turret has fallen. The next will be soon to follow as Crispy going in deep to help lock up even more kills, even more stats. Had those KDAs, says Nova, as the second Nexus explodes.
A quick 2-0 from Optimal Esports Nova, and hey, Aulz, I thought Divine Temple might even get out to a lead in the early game, but OEN is going to reel it right back. And that's exactly what we saw here. Those 2 dragons going down to Divine Temple meant that they knew they had to play towards their win condition in the bot lane. The unfortunate fact of the matter was, though, that OEN knew how to team fight, and they had the damage that Divine Temple didn't, even from behind. And what I think is most commendable from them is that in that situation where they were down about 1.5 to 2k gold, they still knew that Major wasn't that far behind Static just because of where their builds were and where the back timers were, and therefore they forced, they won, and from there it just was a classic OEN game of domination.
Yeah, and look at this gold graph because it tells the story of the game. Divine Temple, small victory, small victory, small victory. keeping ahead, but not by too much. OE Nova keeping the game close until they turn on the Jets. A few mistakes from Divine Temple is a few mistakes too many. And boy, oh boy, this team may have a few weaknesses, but they look real strong as we head towards the second half of this season.
All right. Well, Alls, I think that this was definitely one of those weeks where I get a good view of the OCL and I see that there are some incredibly competitive teams taking to the Rift. And so, therefore, if you guys want to continue to keep up with all the action, I recommend dropping a follow. Thank you once again, Spooks Live, for getting all of those subs out there so that we have some consistent viewers coming back, spamming what we got in chat. Thank you for all the support as always. Alls, what do we want to look for the future of the Divine Temple versus OEN kind of matchups where one of these teams is definitely the underdog coming in? Do you think that there is a corrective course for some of these teams on the bottom half of the standings?
Yeah, I mean, some of it just comes down to getting the fundamentals right. And for different teams, there are different fundamentals that need to be worked on. For some of them, it's just staying alive in lane. We've seen that from teams like Ban Out Bunny that haven't quite had the fortitude to get out of those 15 minutes with a chance at the game. For some of them, like Divine Temple in this game, it was the team fighting that needed to be cleaned up and the macro play that needed to be cleaned up. And for some of the teams, they just need to sit back and look at themselves and say, why are we making the decisions that we are? Because we're playing well overall, but we're throwing away consistently. So for the teams in the bottom half of the standings right now, nothing is set in stone. There are still chances to make it to playoffs, but they have to fix what's broken.
All right. Well, that is going to be it for us on this week of broadcast here in the OCL. Make sure that you guys come back for the Poro Division broadcast and then even more from Aulz and I next week. It's been a pleasure covering the OCL, and I'm super, super happy that we're moving deep into the season and seeing who the top contenders are. So many stories are still to be forged. I hope to see you guys again soon. Everybody, have a good night.
I can hear the sound